Hello and welcome to CrossTalk, where all things are considered. I'm Peter Lavelle. The White Helmets, a heartfelt humanitarian NGO, or an elaborate and cynical Western PR stunt promoting illegal regime change in Syria? Does the wearing of white helmets mean they're the good guys supporting a just cause? To CrossTalk the White Helmets, I'm joined by my guest, Vanessa Beeley in Bordeaux. She's an independent investigative journalist and photographer. In Beirut, we have Eva Bartlett. She's an independent writer and justice activist with extensive experience in the Gaza Strip. And in Phoenix, we cross to Patrick Henningsen. He is a journalist, writer, and founder of the news website 21stCenturyWire.com. All right, CrossTalk rules in effect. That means you can jump in anytime you want, and I very much appreciate it. Vanessa, if I can go to you first. From what I understand, you were in Syria 4 weeks ago. Who are the White Helmets? Some call them a heroic NGO, seen to be on cable TV now. Others call the White Helmets Al-Qaeda with a facelift. Go ahead.
Yeah, I had a very interesting 4 weeks in Syria, including some time spent in West Aleppo. Let's have a look, first of all, at the concept of the White Helmets. They claim that they are they're an NGO. They're not funded by any governments, particularly by governments that have a vested interest in the conflict in Syria. That's the number one lie. They receive probably in the region of conservatively $100 million. Primary funder is the UK Foreign Office, followed by the United States via USAID, which we know from their history to be very much connected to deep state in America and an outreach agent for CIA infiltration into target nations. So that's the first black mark against the White Helmets.
Patrick, in Phoenix, I mean, where do these White Helmets operate? From what I understand, they operate where rebel groups, terrorist groups are in operation, and they can move around seamlessly in this chaotic environment that we're all told is so chaotic, with bombs dropping all over the place. I mean, they find themselves in a very convenient situation, I would say.
Well, that's precisely the problem. Apparently, they operate exclusively in what one might call rebel-held areas, but in reality are terrorist-held areas in Syria, namely places like Idlib and also East Aleppo, and in pockets of the outskirts of Damascus and so forth. This is what we're told, but the reality, when you actually research the organization, you find that their base of operations really is in Gaziantep in Turkey. And if you know this city and you understand, there's a number of organizations that are based there, and many of whom are affiliated with what's going on in Syria on the rebel side, and someone might say on the terrorist side as well. So, and that's a very important base in Turkey. So what this organization is, essentially, this is smart power. This is the latest version of smart power. In the NGO, the human rights industry, this is the most advanced version we've seen so far. So if you remember back to the Iraq War and the Jessica Lynch story and how that was used in kind of mythology in order to sort of back the war effort, and the Kuwaits and babies and incubators, and also the Dusty Boy from Aleppo a couple of months ago, the poster child of the responsibility to protect. The White Helmets are essentially being paid by the US, the UK, by the EU, by a number of these host nations, and then they're producing imagery that's being sent back through U.S. media in order to sell the intervention effort, the humanitarian intervention effort, and the need to protect the poor people.
Okay, Eva, explain to me and our viewers here, from what I understand, they say they are nonpartisan, they are non-political, and maybe, I don't know because I can't say for sure, maybe they do save some people here, but at the same time, they're calling for a no-fly zone, the overthrow of the government, the legal government in Damascus here. I mean, how can you be an NGO helping people, saving babies, and demanding airstrikes? There's a contradiction there.
Absolutely. They don't represent the will of the Syrian people. Certainly Syrians, by and large, want the war on Syria to end. They want to return to peace. For white helmets to be working, as mentioned, in al-Nusra areas of Idlib and Aleppo, to actually be seen in many photographs holding weapons and participating in acts of terrorism, this alone makes them not neutral. But absolutely, you cannot be a neutral body and be calling for a no-fly zone, which would mean the decimation of Syria. Absolutely not. And the white helmets, you would notice, would never be in areas that are actually severely being attacked, like Fu and Kafadia, by al-Nusra, by Ahrar al-Sham. You would never see any rescuers there because these are genuine situations where people are being killed. And obviously the white helmets exist as a group that is merely propagating this myth that the Syrian army is killing its own people.
Vanessa, I find this phenomenon of the white helmets absolutely fascinating because it is the way to sell regime change light, okay, with saccharin. Look at these heroic men doing this, heroic acts, and at the same time, because the way Western media, if you read Western media carefully, even if you're not, a biased or partisan, you can start seeing the contradictions coming out. Secretary Kerry saying these very bizarre things about international law, but if you throw the white helmets out there, oh my goodness, we're doing a great thing and we have to help these guys. This is a better way to sell this war, and that's why they're being pushed so much. That's my theory. Go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what you're definitely seeing is very much what happened in Iraq, is the stealth eradication of the Syrian state and the Syrian state institutions. And the white helmets are a huge part of this. If we look again at the funding, conservatively 100 million going into an organization of 3,000 operatives. As actually, just to go back to what Ava said as well about Kafrai and Fua, these so-called neutral, impartial operatives funded by the US coalition fundamentally, that has a heavily vested interest in regime change in Syria. During the Madaya crisis, or the manufactured Madaya crisis, they were seen holding up banners calling for the devastation and destruction of Kafra and Fur, the two Idlib villages that Ava just mentioned. But very quickly, it's very important at this point to point out their role in shadow state building by intelligence, British intelligence, and by US intelligence. There is an existing Syria civil defense. It was created in 1953. It was a founder member of the ICDO, the International Civil Defense Organization. And just to give you a very brief update on what happened yesterday, we discovered yesterday that the ICDO website link to the Syrian Arab Republic Syria Civil Defense had been infiltrated, let's say, and the link was in fact linking to the White Helmets website. Now that wasn't like that about a week ago. So after various emails and phone calls to the ICDO, I managed to speak to them this morning. And in fact, the person that I spoke to appeared to be horrified. He said it was an administration mistake, and they admitted to me that the White Helmets are not recognized by the ICDO. They're not recognized by the UN as a civil defense organization. The only recognized organization inside Syria is the Syria Civil Defense, the real Syria Civil Defense. So not only are the White Helmets questionable on their funding and on their independence, and they're trained in Turkey, not in Syria. They're embedded in Nusra Front and ISIS-held areas and various other brigades of terrorists under various names. They're also now proven to be attempting to usurp the existence of the real Syria Civil Defense. And through the testimony of the real Syria Civil Defense that I spoke to, the crews in various governorates in Syria, they not only usurped them, they killed them when they took over the centers, the real Syria Civil Defense centers in Deir ez-Zor, in Raqqa, in Idlib, in East Aleppo, and they stole their equipment.
You know, Patrick, one of the things I understand is that the white helmets, they don't want to deal with any government instrument or organization or individuals in Syria whatsoever. But there's supposed to be a humanitarian thing. I mean, isn't that beyond ideology here? But apparently they go on their own. From the videos I've seen on in social media, which I take with a grain of salt very often, okay, but nonetheless I'll mention it, is that they seem to be, some of them are carrying arms, and they just seem so conveniently there when something happens, which should make anyone suspicious.
You know, I showed these videos to a U.S. Marine, and the first thing he said to me, he said, do they only rescue little girls and children? How come they never rescue any adults? You know, common sense question. But you can lay the blame of most of this at the feet of the media, and specifically the U.S. media and the U.K. and the European media. They don't check, none of this is verified. Not one of these photographs or videos is verified. Where's the location? What time of day? Was this indeed correlating with an actual airstrike by Syria or Russia? No checking at all goes into this. So previously we had CNN will fabricate a war scene. We saw this in the first Gulf War. This is provable. We also saw this with Danny Diem in Syria, and we're staging sort of scenes of bombings and wars and putting it out as real news. Al Jazeera has also been caught doing this in the past. So this wag the dog phenomenon with the media, now the media doesn't have to do it. This pseudo NGO is producing that same imagery now, and it's somehow presented to the public as authentic through the mainstream media in the West, and not one bit of verification, no due diligence whatsoever. Editors literally pick up the material provided to them by this US, UK, European-backed NGO, and they run it on the front page without any questions. And there's your headlines, there's your story. And then the public have this sort of synthetic outrage as a result, and it's sacrosanct. It's sacrosanct. You can't question it. It's all about the children and saving Aleppo and so forth. This is how the campaign's being run.
All right, I'm going to jump in here. We're going to go to a short break, and after that short break, we'll continue our discussion on the white helmets in Syria. Stay with RT. Welcome back to CrossTalk, where all things are considered. I'm Peter Lavelle. To remind you, we're discussing what the white helmets are really all about. Okay, I'd like to go back to Eva in Beirut. You know, Eva, I follow your work, I follow Vanessa's, and I follow Patrick's. And one of the things that I see this paradigm, this new hybrid type of warfare, which that's what the white helmets are. And what I find really disturbing and extremely dangerous is that this new hybrid, this paradigm is replacing what media, what journalism should be all about. Because as we just heard from Patrick, everybody just takes it all in. You know, oh, here's the picture, okay. Here's a recording, okay. And then you just circulate it here. It's taking journalism out of the picture completely. And I would also say that we have these editors, particularly on the major networks around the world, that they just kowtow to official lines. I mean, this is a dramatic change. We saw this starting in 2003 with the Iraq War, and they've just gotten better and better and better at it.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. In my last visit to Syria, I went twice to Aleppo with mainly the express intent of seeing what life was like in Aleppo, but also to speak with the Aleppo Medical Association. And this is an important factor because this association has over 4,160 registered doctors. And so, you know, when we talk about these talking points that are taken as fact by most corporate media and unfortunately some alternative media that are supposed to be representing the left, they will run these headlines. We've seen it especially quite recently, the last doctor in Aleppo, the last pediatrician in Aleppo, the last hospitals in Aleppo. And so, you know, establishing that there are actually over 4,000 registered doctors in Aleppo, including 800 specialists, is one important aspect. But also visiting, as a journalist would, to visit the hospitals that have been actually attacked and documented by these Western-backed terrorists. For example, the Dabit Maternity Hospital in Aleppo, which was attacked on May 3rd. This is important, and this is something that these corporate media journalists could do if they were interested in telling the truth. They could have gone to Jeble, which on May 23rd at the same day that Tartus was attacked, Jebel suffered a series of massive terrorist suicide and car bombing attacks. And this is, you would think that this was important news. One of these attacks was a suicide bomber that exploded himself in the emergency ward of the Jebel hospital, which was already treating people that had been injured in prior suicide attacks that day. So these are very key stories that didn't get any coverage in the corporate media. Meanwhile, you have outlets like Fox showing the Kindi Hospital, which was a state hospital, the best in the Middle East for cancer treatment, that was destroyed. It was truck bombed in December 2013 by Nusra. And now you have Fox showing this hospital, this image, and saying that this is in eastern Aleppo and that the so-called government airplanes have destroyed it. This is the level of propaganda that we're dealing with. And one day to the next, you'll see the last hospital, the last 4 hospital, the last doctors, the last 20 doctors. There's no consistency even in their lies.
You know, Vanessa, one of the reasons why I wanted to do this program, you know, number one is that the White Helmets are given such a pass without real investigation. I know that all 3 of you have done work on the White Helmets here. What I worry about most is that this is going to be used as the reason something must be done. I mean, oh no, you know, Nobel Prize possibly here. I mean, they've been elevated so much, they've been groomed so much here, and because they don't have any logical reason, because of international law, that this is going to be one of the last straws. You know, this is what we have to be supporting here. And Western publics are just pumped and pumped day in, day out with this kind of stuff here. And I truly worry that it's going to be used as a reason to start or escalate this conflict even more to a disastrous level, if that's even possible for that poor country, Syria. Go ahead, Vanessa.
Yeah, you know, that you're so right there, and it's really worrying. I mean, I think if it is announced that they win the Nobel Peace Prize tomorrow, then we're being driven to the precipice of war and moral bankruptcy, because this organization is not only embedded in Nusra, Al-Qaeda territory, ISIS territory, all the various factions, whether it's Nour al-Zinki. Last night, Channel 4 put out a video where they actually followed Nour al-Zinki. Now, Nour al-Zinki, as we know, beheaded a 12-year-old Palestinian child, Abdullah Issa, a few weeks ago. And here is Channel 4, basically very like CNN, normalizing suicide bombers, talking about suicide bombers as if it's a perfectly acceptable form of attack against civilians in West Aleppo. And also running alongside the Nour al-Zinki were the White Helmets, actually during the attacks. And it's on film with Channel 4. It's not picked up. You know, I would really like to challenge these media organizations, these BBCs and Channel 4. Only a few days ago in Holland, there was an Al-Qaeda operative that gave an interview to Dutch TV who was later found to be registered on the UK government Al-Qaeda list. You know, are we reaching a point where our entire news stream out of Syria is going to be brought to us by Al-Qaeda or by those who are linked to Al-Qaeda? The White Helmets are not only linked to Al-Qaeda in the sense that they are embedded in those areas. There are numerous videos out there of them participating in the capture of civilians, in the beating, in the torture of civilians. Their operatives have been known to post to their social media sites videos of the torture and the public execution of prisoners of war, Syrian Arab Army soldiers. We were told that that one particular operative was sacked, but no official statement was made by this humanitarian NGO to condemn a public execution and torture of prisoners of war, which contravenes every single Geneva Convention that exists on the rules of war. And there was a further execution of a civilian in Aleppo, which was filmed, where basically the White Helmets came in as a mop-up operation.
Yeah,
so, you know, and then add to that the testimony from the real Syria Civil Defense. We're not just seeing a sort of an outreach organization for the States and the UK. We're seeing an organization that's embedded in terrorist areas and is supporting and facilitating terrorist activity.
You know, Patrick, it seems to me that the White Helmets are actually just a PR proxy for a failed policy in Syria by the West, particularly the United States. It's diversion. It's shifting the topic. We would prefer to talk about this. And like I said, I want to stress here, I'm not saying because I don't know. Maybe they do save some people. I'm going to be very careful with my words, as a journalist should be. But at the same time, they are being used as a proxy to prepare Western audiences for the next step. Go ahead.
Yeah, and I think there has to be a level of skepticism in journalism and the media, because clearly you're not going to get it from government, that's for certain. Our government has proven time and time again that is willing to go to any depth. It's willing to lie, cheat, to deceive the public. This is proven fact. This is history, okay? And they've proven that. So where's the fourth estate? Where's the media? There has to be a level of skepticism in looking at these images and saying, what exactly are we looking here? And, you know, having worked in first aid, having, you know, myself being certified International Red Cross person in the past for work, I've done first aid. I've had to use backboards for spinal injuries. You never see any of this in any of their videos. It's just man holding child over the shoulder, and then the dramatic, well-lit picture. And some of these videos, you can look at them, and any normal person who's in video editing will see it's heavily edited for the money shot, and also that it's unauthentic completely. You could say that it's fake or staged in many cases. We posted these online for people to look at, and most people are agreeing, yes, some of these are staged. So even if a few of them are fake, and these are being used to influence public perception, to get the public behind regime change or behind an escalation of war by the United States and its coalition, then this is a big problem. Then there's a level of deception going on here. And then to parlay that into a Nobel Peace Prize is just on another level. I think if they do win the Nobel Peace Prize, it'll be the end of the Nobel Peace Prize, because there's so much evidence out there. There's so much visual forensic evidence that point to this being a group that is not exactly what it's being sold as.
Eva, in your travels through Syria, what is the awareness level of the White Helmets? Because as we've pointed out on this program, they're in terrorist or rebel-held territory. What do the Syrians that you've come across know about this organization? And if they know about it, what do they think about it?
Almost no Syrian that I met knew of the White Helmets. The only people that were aware were people that had some sort of interest in media and the media scams and the shams that are going on. So if you ask the average Syrian, including in Aleppo, I should note, and including doctors in the Aleppo Medical Association, they aren't aware of the White Helmets. So clearly this is not an organization that's representing the Syrian people. I think there's an interesting note too. You know, the UN Security Council passed the resolution 2253 and then 24 hours later 2254. Essentially, 2253 was about cutting the funding and support and training of terrorists, and 2254 was more focused on a political solution, which the Western nations have taken to use as a way of regime changing Syria. But 2253 is essential before there can be any peace in Syria. 2253, the ending of funding of terrorists, must end. And this actually applies to the White Helmets. You have to stop funding these propagandists who are also, in many instances, as my colleagues have said, holding weapons and participating in acts of violence against Syrian civilians.
You know, Vanessa, as we go down this path here, are the White Helmets just a shadow government of one form or another? We're going to see other organizations like this pop up as a replacement after, unfortunately, and I'm very pessimistic that the U.S. will eventually attack directly and very harshly Syria. 20 seconds, last word.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely right. And if you look at what the UK government is creating, along with the Free Syria Police, taxpayers' money is going heavily into the creation of this shadow state in Syria. And this shadow state in Syria is destroying the existing state institutions in order to secure its own existence.
Okay, we've a fascinating discussion, but we've run out of time. Many thanks to my guests in Bordeaux, Beirut, and in Phoenix. And thanks to our viewers for watching us here at RT. See you next time. And remember, CrossTalk rules. I love it.